Hey friends, after my recent newsletter on copyright protection, I got inboxed with the same question over and over. This sounds great, Heath, but I don't have 3 hours to spend transforming samples. That's a fair point. So today I'm breaking down the 5 fastest sample flip techniques I use, the ones I teach producers who are short on time but want sounds that are unmistakably theirs. We're talking 90 seconds to 5 minutes per technique, no complex sound design, no expensive plugins, just practical methods that work. As a bonus, I'm going to use all 5 techniques to build a musical idea from scratch so you can see exactly how they can work together in context. If you're tired of your productions sounding like everyone else's, stick around. This one's going to change how you approach samples. So without further ado, let's dive in. We are working in Ableton Live 12 and we're working with a bunch of loops essentially and one Ableton Live preset, more on that in a little bit, and audio effects essentially from Ableton Live's, again, browser. No third-party plugins, nothing too fancy at all here. It's all about speed, efficiency, and turning these samples into our own. So let's start with the very first one, quite a favorite one of mine, where we've got an audio track here. It's called the pitch and filter shift technique. On this audio track, I've dragged in the lovely new auto filter from Ableton Live, popped it on the track, and I've got a percussion loop here, a djembe percussion loop, which sounds like this. We hit play. Great, so a really nice groovy djembe percussion loop. So the very first thing I'm going to do with that percussion loop is open it up so I can see the waveform and the clip envelopes, and I'm going to pop over to the pitch macro and I'm going to turn it down to minus 24 semitones. Now, for those of you who are music theory savvy, you'll pick up straight away that's exactly 2 octaves. You can pitch this to whatever value you like. It's generally going to be a minus if you're doing the technique that I'm going to show you here today, which is turn this percussion loop into a bass line or a bass idea. And so, you know, if you work in multiples of 12, minus 12, 1 octave, minus 24, minus 36, and so on, that could be a nice sort of place to begin with. So if we already hit play now, we've got 2 octaves lower and it sounds like this. Great. And so the next thing we're going to do now is simply turn on our auto filter. We're going to keep it in a high cut or low pass filter shape. We might change it from 24 decibels to 12 decibels, so it's a bit of a smoother curve. And then we're literally just going to bring down the filter frequency, hit play, and shape it to where we like it sounds. And we could also add a bit of drive here if we like, for a little bit more character. And it's just as simple as that. We now have something. So if we duplicate that, our clip up here, let's copy it down. There we go. And on that one, we simply put our 24 semitones back out the way and turn off our filter. We have, and we now have, great. So that's the first one. Moving across to the right, we've got our next technique in play. It's called the reverse and chop. And what I've chosen here is a vocal kind of sample that sounds like this. Great, so the very first thing we're going to do again, open up the waveform like we have. We're going to reverse the sample, simply clicking over here. And then what we're going to do is create a brand new loop within the sample. Now, I'm going to just pick a random location like this, Command L or Control L on Windows, Command L on Mac, make a loop. And as you can see, the loop right now snaps to the area that I drew through and highlighted, but we can obviously reshape that to different sizes, and we can even go down as small as like 1/16 here if we want to go that small. So you can make, you know, all sorts of different size loops. And if you do work with a smaller grid size, such as a 64th or 30-second or something like that, it means that we can actually move that loop around then in smaller increments rather than bigger increments. But for the starters, I'm going to make it like, let's say, 1 bar long, something like that, and then I'm going to hit play. Actually, that would be 1 bar, sorry. And then I can move that around till I find something interesting. That's quite interesting around here. And there's a lot more we can do here, just showing you the very basics, but we've reversed it, which changes all of the envelopes and the decays. It changes the attack and decay of the sounds. But like I said, we can change the size of the loop. So you might want a smaller, more rhythmical loop, and we can move the playhead around, which changes where the sample plays back from. Just a quick demo of that. Which changes completely how the loop might sound. And then, as I said, we can make it very small. And you can zoom in, and sometimes what's really interesting, as I said, if you zoom in and change your grid size in the back, you can move into something more interesting, right? So let's work with what we've got there. We can put back in the djembe and hear them together. Great. So moving on, again, speed and efficiency. Moving to the right, we've got this track called Pad. Now on this track, this is the only MIDI track in this little project idea here, this demonstration. So I've got a chord progression that I played in earlier here in a MIDI clip. And on this track, we've got a drift preset called Monday Morning. So if you like how it sounds, you'll find that in Ableton Live's browser. And I've deliberately chosen this preset because it's a fairly simple sort of sound. And that's good because we're continuing with our idea of the 5-minute sample flip. We're going to turn it into something a bit different by using a sample. So let's have a listen to it in its raw form. Okay, it's nice, it's sweet, it's pretty, all those good things, but it's lacking a little bit of extra spice. And so we're going to spice it up, take it away from vanilla sounding by adding a texture layer onto that preset. What I've got here is a recording of people walking in a shopping mall, and it sounds like this. Pretty cool. And so what we're going to do is we're going to open up our pad track again. We're going to come down to our preset here, our drift preset. We're going to group it, Command G on a Mac or Control G on Windows. Then we're going to come down the left-hand side here to the show and hide tabs, and we're going to reveal the chains. And then literally what we're going to do is drag that sample down and create a new chain with that sample inside of a simpler. Nice and easy. That's all you need to do. I'm going to stop that audio track that was just there to demonstrate it, drag it out the way. We don't need that anymore at all. Turn it off. And then back to our 2 chains now. The next thing I'm going to do is, if you find the sample you're using is a little bit quiet, this one's okay. But if it is, you can right click in the window on top of the waveform and let's normalize it. So we boost that up a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is simply use the playhead again of where this sample triggers back playing from to sort of sift through this recording like it's a very long recording. It's 187 bars of audio. So we don't need all of that. I just want to find a nice little bit of texture from it that's going to be part of these chords and part of this instrument. Okay, that's quite interesting. And then what I can do is come over to my volume over here and bring it all the way down to the bottom, and then just dial in how much of that texture is going to sit on top. Now I want to make sure it's a little bit different to the voices I've already got, so I'm just going to add that back in. Nice, so they're working together. That's what I wanted to just check there. Great, so moving on, that's now a really interesting preset that now has its own spice and flavor by adding a sample, a loop in this case, to it. Fast, really interesting. We're moving quickly along here. So the next example is called Extreme EQ Sculpt. What I've got here is a breakbeat, which sounds like this. So super nice drum break loop. What we're going to do here, I've already dragged it on, but if you're starting from scratch, you need to drag in an EQ8, and then we're going to use this EQ8, but we're going to be quite brutal with it. We're going to really try and sculpt a new sound out of this breakbeat loop. So I'm going to turn on a low cut. I'm going to sweep that right up quite a bit. And then there's something that caught my ear within that drum break, something like a little crunchy kind of percussion sound. And I think I want to basically make this whole loop around that sound and cut away most of the rest of it, or turn it into a new sound using the EQ. So there's something up here. So I won't use the high shelf actually. We'll just turn on maybe 7. Yeah, it's that little crunchy bit of percussion that sounds really interesting to me. So I'm going to boost that with 7, low cut, quite extreme. And then I'm going to add another one of these bell curves, maybe 5. And let's do a low cut somewhere in here. Something like that. Okay, so let's put that in with what we've got so far. Nice. So a little bit of just balancing the volume out, but let's move on to our next technique. This is probably the one that takes the most creativity so far. The rest of them I've shown you the technique really clearly, what's involved, the EQ, the auto filter, finding a new loop, adding texture on top of that preset. This one, you can pretty much freestyle it. It's a lot about adding your own personal favorite effects to it and reprocessing it with those effects and resampling it. So let's have a listen to what we're working with. We've got this lead loop here, which sounds like this. Nice, so a bit of a riff going on there. That sounds pretty cool. Sorry, we'll just stop that for a moment. So what I'm going to do here is I've chosen a couple of favorite effects that I'm thinking to use to, first of all, reprocess the loop so it sounds different. So what I've grabbed myself is a grain delay and a hybrid reverb and raw. So what I'm going to use first is the grain delay. So let's switch that on. And let's start working on this sample. So let's hit stop so everything else is quiet for a moment. And let's transform this sample a bit first. Okay, so grain delay, I chose that because it's great for sort of like repitching delays on the sample, which I love, the pitch and frequency part. And then I've used a bit of spray to spread those little delays around. Really interesting sound just with that. And then we're going to just add a bit of reverb to that as well. And let's choose, say, the spring reverbs because they're a little bit more quirkier. And surf through till we find one that we like. Okay, this one's good. Let's try maybe a bit of vintage character. And a bit of subtle. And then maybe algorithmic reverb, so we'll blend right over. And maybe quartz. Yeah, I'm going to go with quartz. So that's the first step. I'm going to use those two to process the dry sound, what we've got now. So a couple of favorite effects. Then what we're going to do is we're going to record that basically. So I've already set up an audio track here to record it, but if you're working from scratch, you just insert a brand new audio track. And then what you want to do is reveal the ins and outs. And at the very top here in the in section of your new audio track, you want to choose resampling. And that essentially is going to listen to the main track, whatever goes through the main track, that's going to record on this track. We turn it to in, we arm it, and away we go. It's ready to record into it. One thing to make sure is if you do choose resampling like I have here, so we're listening to the main track, that you put the track that you're going to record into here into solo so that we don't record, if there are other clips playing and other tracks playing, we don't record all of that onto this track. So I'm going to delete that. That was just quickly to show you how to do it. I'm going to arm the example I've already got set up here, and we're just going to hit record. Let it run for a little bit. Great, that will do. So normally what I do is I don't really use the first bit where the recording launches from. I'll sort of come into it a little bit further in and loop up and use that section. So I'm going in here where I've got a nice 4-bar loop. And I'm just going to simply bring that back over and drop it onto the track we're already working with. Again, I can move my resampling track out the way now. And now we've got step 1 done. I'm going to just turn off those 2 effects that we used a moment ago. And now what I'm going to do is reprocess or process what we've got now. So we've got something that sounds fresh already. And now I'm just going to use a bit of raw to take it to another level. So let's do that. And there we go. We've got a brand new kind of sounding lead. So if we listen to the A/B of what we had, we'll just turn off the raw for a second. We were working with that. And now we've got that. And it's pretty obvious to my ear that that no longer sounds like the original source, which is what we're kind of trying to achieve here. Right across the board, we've got fast, quick, instant results, and nothing really, apart from the reverse chop, probably sounds that close. And of course, the preset with the texture, nothing sounds really that close to the original sample, which is the whole idea here. So if we put all of this into action now, I'm just going to drag a couple of things around a little bit so they don't play. Make sure our tracks are turned on. So now if we hit play, we can hear all of this in context. We'll probably do a little bit of volume adjustment, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you can do next. Awesome. So that's really just for me lacking just a kick drum and a nice sort of drum kit to go underneath there. But as far as all the sort of musical idea layers are, I think we're in a good place here of what could become an interesting track. Now, there's one more example that I'm not going to walk through, but again, just to leave you with a bit more inspiration, there's nothing wrong with now what I call then the compound effect, which is actually to combine some of these together, right? So with a little bit of imagination and a bit more creativity, you can start taking some of these techniques and combining them together for another extra bonus sixth technique. So we've walked through 5 different ones. That could be a 6th one. And of course, tip of the iceberg stuff as usual. A lot of these can be tweaked, refined, and taken to different places. So on that note, I'm going to wrap things up. I hope you've enjoyed the video, found it beneficial, and can see from working through these techniques that really almost and really honestly quicker than surfing through a bunch of presets or sample libraries. With a little bit of confidence and a little bit of practice, you can grab lots of different source material and tweak it and turn it into your own. And the link was there in the newsletter from a previous newsletter where I discussed issues about using splice samples as they are and then ending up with a flag, copyright flag, or a copyright strike. If you get in the habit of taking samples, being an artist, and transforming them into your own from the get-go, you will tend not to have issues at all with those kind of things. So on that note, I would like to point out as well that if you want to take this further and develop techniques specific to your music and your sounds, I work one-to-one with DJs, artists, and producers on exactly this stuff. There's a link in the description to book a free call, and we can figure it out if we're a good fit and map out what your signature sound could look like. No pressure at all, just a conversation. So on that note, ladies and gents, keep on creating. If you enjoyed the video, share it with your friends. You know the buttons, push all of those. It helps the channel an awful lot. And I'll see you all very soon in another tutorial or live stream. Take care, everybody. Keep on creating. Bye. Ciao.